Hey everyone, let's listen up. These are the real 5 virtues of Confucianism, as written in the book of D's Nuts. 1. Don't kill over spilt milk. 2. Don't leave your laundry in the machine for over 10 minutes after it's done. That sucks. 3. Subscribe to Stoneworks. 4. Science. 5. Whenever you see James Tullos, throw apples at him. I'm only kidding about some of those. Today, let's do a summary of Confucianism and talk a little bit about how religious, philosophical power worked in China. Here's my disclaimer, just know that I'm a history student reading stuff online and doing my own historical analysis.
Join the Discord's Minecraft server and let's go.
First, let me state that Chinese religion is super different. Whereas we in the West must identify with one set of beliefs, Chinese religion is like a big worship soup, with ingredients like ancestor spirits, nature spirits, philosophical schools, Buddhism, folk tales, folk gods, potatoes, Christianity, sages, mythological history, carrots. I'm still thinking about the soup.
I feel like one of the most confused popular conceptions of Chinese religion comes from how many view Confucianism.
Calling that a religion is weird? Confucianism is a philosophical tradition built from sages that are definitely highly venerated, but it doesn't make any claims about gods or spirits. The founder Confucius even said,
"We do not yet know how to serve man. How can we know about serving the spirits?"
This isn't to say that Confucianism is atheist or anything. Far from it. Many Confucians believe heaven, Tian, to be an all-powerful source of good and destiny, but this isn't like a core part of Confucianism. But also, like a religion, the philosophy professes a strong moral code and promotes traditional, communal rituals. However, it's also very political. To set the scene, in the 500s BCE, the Zhou dynasty was slowly disintegrating and regional lords were increasingly fighting each other for power. In this fractured arena of small states, smart politics, political advisors, and diplomatic strategy were hugely important for the state's survival and growth. This is the context for a guy called Confucius, or Confucius in Chinese. I gave that my best shot. He was a political advisor, but funnily enough, he wasn't very good at it, and he got booted from several posts in different states. So he turned to wandering around and teaching a small group of people that eventually compiled his lessons into the earliest Confucian canon after he died. But what did he teach and how is it political? Confucian teachings greatly deal with social interactions and hierarchies. Confucius generally taught that people must respect and be pious towards their superiors, their parents, teachers, elders, and husbands. Yes, wives were seen as subordinate because patriarchy. In turn, the superiors must give compassion and guidance to their subordinates. Playing your proper role in these relationships would make you virtuous, and this virtue reflects how good of a ruler you would be. To me, this explanation of the ideology seems like it strives to make the rule of the Chinese governmental bureaucracies efficient with how officials would interact with each other and their subjects. The people would have to respect and follow the government as long as the government was virtuous back to them. It allows for a clear chain of command and gives explicit goals for how each person should act in these relationships. And if the rulers didn't do a virtuous good job, well, the mandate of heaven could take care of that. The mandate of heaven is a very important Chinese religious political philosophy which basically dictates that heaven allows bad rulers to be overthrown, especially if there's a lot of natural disasters and the rulers don't deal with them well. I guess Tian is causing all of those storms, floods, and earthquakes because it isn't very happy. Honey, grab the pitchfork. The mandate of heaven was first established when the ancient Zhou dynasty overthrew the Shang dynasty in the 1100s BCE, so it was at least established during Confucius's time. This contributed well to the crazy rebellions that China has had over its history. Sure, like, Europe has had more national rebellions per square kilometer, but China has rebellions that go fucking hard. You go, girl. Do you guys think the thumbnail for this video makes sense in this context? It could either be completely wrong or completely right depending on how you see it.
The morality of Confucianism comes in the strong code of etiquette and social rituals.
Speaking without permission?
Modern comparisons could be things like not calling your teachers by their first names or covering your face when you sneeze. Confucius would have known all the social rules from the Zhou dynasty when it wasn't falling apart, and he taught the rules as a profession. The idea was, back then, everyone followed the rules correctly, and therefore society ran well, and the Zhou dynasty had actual political power. This is a core central idea to Confucianism, maybe even more than those hierarchies I was talking about. If everyone follows the social rules, society will run well. With this in mind, it's most important for the government and powerful families to follow the rules, to lead by example, so that society doesn't fall apart. Why would the peasants follow the rules if the people in charge don't have to? A lot of original Confucian knowledge is simply about what the social rules are and how to properly follow them when the society of the Zhou dynasty is further and further disintegrating into a bunch of different warring states. So after all of that juicy Confucius knowledge gets written down, it turns out that the next dynasty that comes to power, the Qin, sucks. They do a bunch of Confucius book burning. They're also super authoritarian and will punish you harshly for anything. They don't give a f***. They followed a philosophy called legalism. This is a good example of the state being heavily tied to a certain doctrine or religion and persecuting everything else that doesn't contribute to the government's attempt to impose their view on society. The Soviet Union and Seleucid Empire under Antiochus IV did the same thing to the native Siberians and the Jews, respectively, as diminishing cultural religious differences between them would, in theory, strengthen the government's control there. Really, it just led to more resistance. Just like here in the Qin dynasty. So China does what China do when China rebelled, and shortly after, the Han dynasty rose up. The early Han emperors Gao Zu and Wu realized that, hey, treating people nicely is good for keeping your job.
You could make a religion. No, don't.
This isn't a religion, as I, the master, was saying before. What the fuck?
They start adopting what remains of Confucius's writings, whose ideas become more and more important in education and were eventually adopted all throughout the different populations and social classes of China. So, Confucianism waxes and wanes in influence over its 2,500-year lifespan, because sometimes it has to be reinvented of sorts. The scholar Zhu Xi reinvigorated Confucianism in the 1100s. Now, it was Neo-Confucianism. So epic. One of the important values emphasized by Zhu Xi was activism, so his most hardcore students got super hype and spread it to a bunch of people in Korea and Japan. China at this point had a systematized way for noble families to join the huge government bureaucracy. Students had to take these standardized tests. And wouldn't you know, with the popularity of Neo-Confucianism, these tests were mostly based on how well-read you are in Confucius' teachings. So this philosophical school becomes a massive political force by virtue of it being the intellectual standard for someone to join the government. Yes, the SATs and baccalaureate suck, but I guarantee you they aren't as bad as the massive Chinese governmental exams. So Confucianism is moving around like religion, and it has the social impact of one, but like I said, it very notably isn't about gods and spirits. It's about how we work together as a society. Yes, of course, it intermingled with many of the Chinese religious beliefs like gods, spirits, ancestors, Buddhism, and a destiny-writing heaven sky. Absolutely. But Confucianism wasn't something that had its own priests or worship services. It was kept alive by social norms, schooling, scholars, and the government officials. I'd say that the closest thing to a Confucian priest would be a teacher, or at least that's what Zhu Xi thought. Being labeled a Confucian ruler would mean you're doing a good job. So here's a relevant tip I've learned while world building my religions and governments. How you distinguish a good ruler versus a bad ruler regarding effectiveness, historical glory, and religious moral compass is very telling of the society that you're world building. Make a list of these things. The glorious Roman rulers conquered and expanded the empire. The glorious Egyptian rulers built huge monuments. The glorious Malian rulers got hella rich. The glorious Israelite rulers kept God and the temple as a lively political force. And most importantly, the glorious Confucian rulers centralized and stabilized the state with its political hierarchy. At least that's the way I read it. There's a story that I think well captures the cultural psychology that Confucianism builds upon, and it's about the maybe mythological first emperor of China, Yu the Great, although different sources attribute it to different people. After Yu tamed the flooding Yellow River, he established the Xia dynasty and divided his territory into 9 provinces. He extracted a tribute of bronze from each one, melted them all together, and from them cast 9 tripod cauldrons that weighed over 7 tons each. They were installed in the capital and were used ritualistically by the emperor. This serves to show that by coming together under something and doing a bit of sacrifice, because remember, bronze was super expensive, the people together could build something great. Those particular 9 bronze cauldrons were used as symbols of the emperor's authority until the Qin dynasty lost them. Tian, damn it, Qin dynasty! You might be the origin of the Chinese state, but you're ridiculous! This collectivist mindset is important in Chinese history, as living in a massive, fertile basin means the land would either be split into warring kingdoms that are trying to unite the land under their own top dynasty through brutal, prolonged campaigns, or centralized dynasties where everything must maintain its place in the social hierarchy for things to be stable and run smoothly. If things didn't run smoothly, either some general could rise up against the state, like what happened to the Sui dynasty, or the peasants could revolt to overthrow the emperor, like what happened to the Eastern Han dynasty. Religious, philosophical, social organization played a big part in people maintaining their place in the established hierarchy. This isn't to say that government officials wouldn't be ambitious. Of course, they would want to work their way up from being scribes to clerks to administrators of cities and territories, all the way up to being an advisor of the emperor. But Confucian philosophy promoted people to work their way up within that structure on the basis of promotion and demotion, and not, let's say, controlling your hubby, the emperor, from behind the curtain and choosing who gets to be the next emperor and then finally establishing yourself as the emperor. Wu Zetian, baby. While she was manipulative and brutal, she got done. This video hasn't even scratched the surface of Chinese religion or philosophy. I haven't even mentioned Buddhism or Daoism, which are arguably as, if not more, influential than Confucianism, but I wanted to focus on this. I didn't even talk about the communal ritualistic aspect of Confucianism, and that's a big part. For world building, this exploration showed us a few things regarding religion, philosophy, and politics. Doctrine that society accepts as defining good ethics and rulership helps motivate society to act in that way. This doctrine reflects the needs of society in a micro and macro scale, like how ancient Confucianism promoted a rigid structure in the family and the state to keep the order and peace. Different spiritual and philosophical traditions can easily mix. You don't need to just choose one religion. It's like a big bowl of soup. I've been thinking about that this entire time. Religion philosophy can serve the will of the people and justify exceptions in traditions that otherwise reinforce existing power structures, i.e., mandate of heaven. In order to stay alive, religion and philosophy needs to evolve and adapt, and promoting values that encourage its spread and adherence help that to happen greatly. Zhu Xi was the GOAT. The Qin dynasty was a bunch of authoritarian goofballs. Cultures have standards for people who enter politics, and these standards are often defined by cultural religious values. And lastly, rulers who do not adhere to these values are often looked down upon and scorned for it in the history books. With these things in mind, hopefully the ancient history of the Awoken Giant can help make your world building more fleshed out, and I hope you can draw inspiration from this video. Oh, and by the way, the real Confucius virtues that I joked about in the beginning are benevolence, righteousness, social propriety, wisdom, fidelity, and subscribing to Stoneworks. I'm serious about that one, but I still got my apples ready for James Tullos. Come at me, bro. Hey y'all, this is Jack Stoneworks. Boy, I enjoyed making this video. I really grinded it out, so it was hard, and it was my first time using Adobe Premiere, so it's a little technically meh compared to my other recent ones. Anyways, do your thing. Love you. Hugs and kisses. Goodbye.